Come closer. Let's talk if you don't mind. I got a real treat for you today.
Don't panic.
Ooh.
Hagrid, exactly what is that?
That, Ron, is a hippogriff.
You're not going mad. I can see them too. What's that? A dragon.
Stop it. Dementor, Dementor!
Seriously misunderstood creatures spiders are. The eyes, I reckon.
Not to mention the pincers.
Cool.
Our concept of these creatures was to make absolutely certain that they had a lot of character. And we wanted to create creatures that we had never seen before on screen.
We never thought of them as creatures. We always thought of them as people. The whole goal was to try to create an organic universe.
You're always encountering new creatures. Harry sees one of them, you know, he steps back and it's kind of like, wow, is it going to eat me or what? Because there's something really intimidating but mesmeric about it.
Creatures are the wild side of the magical world. They're raw, visceral part of the Harry Potter world.
You've got to believe that Harry is going to get eaten, or fried, or drowned.
We haven't gone to a different world. There is magic in this world, but it's just that we Muggles don't see it, but it's there.
You believe that these ancient creatures could be roaming the English landscape, forgotten by society and culture. There's a world of magic and creatures that lurks beyond the sight of normal people like us.
I say, no underage wizards allowed in today. Shut the damn door!
So rude.
The primary goal is to make it believable. This has got to be grounded in reality.
They're not just fantasy films, despite the fact that Harry fights dragons. I think the reason the books, first of all, and then the films have found such a wide audience is because they resonate with the personal and human story.
We have to stay true to the books and then build on that and hopefully open it out.
Creature design can be challenged, to say the very least. Blank sheet of paper, as intimidated as can be.
For me personally, the most fun part of the job is when I start work on a creature, because you can let your imagination just run riot.
You're thinking, what's it going to have to look like? What's its character? Is it good, bad, you know, intelligent, stupid?
I think we all paint a picture of the creatures of Harry Potter in our minds when we read the books. And the filmmakers go to great lengths to achieve a look that is as close to the book and hopefully as close to everyone's image of that creature as possible.
Welcome to the Creature Shop. We do things like producing the live-action creatures that would be required to actually be there on the set, and any prosthetic makeups, as well as supplying the visual effects department with painted models.
If it's a sort of organic form, then it probably originated in here.
When people go into the creature shop, they see these creatures they have never seen before, except in Harry Potter, coming to life. I mean, so much concentrated in this one place is amazing.
I just think the creature department is one of the most imaginative departments that we have here at Leavesden. It's so creative what they're doing, seeing things that they've never dreamed or imagined before, and it's just breathtaking.
Just amazing to touch these things. They can literally just build, make anything you want, really. It's like the hippogriff is just really cool, and like the Aragog, the big spider, which is horrible.
It's sad that some of those sort of beautiful puppetry things are sort of dying out, but what I think is exciting about visual effects and where it's going now is that it allows you to put a dragon on the top roof of Hogwarts and fly them around.
I always wanted to see the dragons because I remember reading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I can picture my room, my bedroom back home. I was laid there for like 4 days just reading this book. I wanted to see the dragons desperately.
The Horntail Dragon, Paul Catling is the concept artist, and it became apparent very early on that you could take that sort of horny addition and then extend that into the ridge of his back. And so these spines that come off his face and off his neck and his body were an extension of the horned tail. And I think in inventing that, he had latched onto something which is immediately unique, interesting. Oh my God, look at that creature.
The dragon is a great creature to work with because his scale is massive. He's the most aggressive of all the dragons. So really the key to the story was developing this persistence that the dragon had of the chase. It was absolutely single-minded in what it wanted to do. He's not an intelligent creature in the sense of he's just going to go and try and kill you. You know, it's a real sort of rip-roaring sort of ride as far as a sequence to work on.
The great tail is swishing round now!
I think developing that sequence was very exciting for Mike because I don't think he'd done anything really like that before.
His dragon chase, I couldn't get right at all, and I wandered all over the map. I was going to have the dragon burn down a forest, and everybody was looking at me saying, and that it was also beginning to cost too much. And then it was Jimmy who said, what we're going to do is we're going to have this dragon chase. The dragon is going to go skidding round, and he's going to grab onto roofs, and he delivered this brilliant sequence, which was his invention.
The dragon sequence had to just be something a little bit bigger than what was written in the book, and so when we came up with the sequence of flying around Hogwarts, it really put the pressure on us because we really wanted to up the ante, basically.
I saw this quivering character that's hung to the edge of the castle like a bat, and you thought, yeah, that's a lovely detail. You believe this dragon is something that's come from the real world, and that makes it even more stunning.
The most important thing was to get across to the audience that Harry was in danger. It wasn't Harry Potter's world, so he had to rise to the task in order to survive.
With the dragon, some of the looks that you see of peril are genuine. There were times when I was actually quite scared, but we have got a fantastic stunt department on Harry Potter who will not let me die.
The big creatures we store in here because there's quite frankly nowhere else to put them. So we have the Horntail from Goblet of Fire, and this is a functioning mechanical creature. It has a flamethrower in it that our special effects department constructed, so it can actually breathe fire.
With something like the Horntail, you read the script and you go, well, it's CG, it has to be. But there's a scene where it's in a cage. There's nothing there that can't be done for real. And so we built a fire-breathing dragon, partly because I've always wanted to build a fire-breathing dragon. Mike loved the dragons. Got some lovely video, and the first time he saw this dragon in the cage, and you could just hear Mike Newell go. He was like a kid in a sweet shop.
Save the red.
You're still looking at the spiders, and then I'll say Paragon.
The first shot we did in the Spider's Hollow, me and Rupert, we were just going to go over their sledge, and we got over there, and there's a 4-ton mechanical spider waiting for us on the other side. And it's got these amazing pincers things. It's really creepy.
I think not.
Aragog worked wonderfully in the book, but it was the one creature in both books that we were all really sort of terrified about designing, because a talking spider gets into a cheesy territory.
Who is it?
So we worked long and hard with our conceptual artists in designing a spider that felt incredibly old, yet a spider that we knew we could keep in the shadows a little bit. I thought that if we were in a brightly lit situation, we would be dead in the water because the audience would be laughing at this talking spider.
Hagrid, is that you?
I did some illustrations of Aragog. He was based, I think, on a wolf spider. And once you scale up a wolf spider, they're pretty scary-looking creatures. I always thought he should have had white eyes because he's blind.
You're Aragog, aren't you?
Yes.
In the movie, you see Aragog climb out of his hole and deliver dialogue, and that was all real, that's not digital. It was a complete mechanical beast.
They made an exact replica of what a spider would look like, right down to the hairs and the legs. And the mouth is one of the most repulsive things you've ever seen in your lives. It's just about your worst nightmare come true.
Dan was just going, that's really horrible, I don't like being near it. And Rupert absolutely freaked. And you think, people are not reacting to it with the fear of being near a large mechanical thing. It triggered the same responses that spiders trigger.
I'm really scared of spiders, so I didn't know really what to expect. But when I saw Aragog, it was really scary because it was massive.
Goodbye, friend of Hagrid.
Can we panic now?
It really did make me feel uneasy. I didn't really like looking at it at all. We saw that scene in the cinema. They kind of added visual effects, all these kind of moving ones on the ground, and it was that I just couldn't. I still can't watch that scene. It's absolutely terrifying.
Let's match the power of Lord Voldemort against the famous Harry Potter.
The basilisk is one of the most terrifying magical beasts that we've ever encountered in these films.
What were you trying to do to make the snake look more magical?
We're just elaborating on the textures, and we're just making things a little bit more exaggerated than, say, a normal snake.
Take it up as far as it'll go, and then give it some left and right. On number 2, the basilisk, we built the first 25 feet so that we could put it on a massive ram and put it on tracks, and we could really run it at Dan.
I was concerned about building the real basilisk. I felt that a gigantic snake needed to be mostly CGI. But Nick Dudman was very persuasive that a realistic, giant mechanical version of the basilisk could be very useful, you know, for Dan's performance. So Nick built this horrific, frightening version of the basilisk, and I mean, Dan was able to key off of that creature. And when those young actors have something tangible to interact with, it makes their performance much more realistic.
If you've got something with fangs hurtling at you and you know it weighs 3/4 of a ton, you actually do react to it in a much better way.
When Dan is fighting on top of the stone head, he was actually fighting a mechanical version of that snake at times, and that was very intimidating because the thing weighs hundreds and hundreds of pounds. But it was awe-inspiring to actually see that basilisk in person. It was pretty amazing.
In the dungeon!
So what do you want to know?
First thing you think about a troll is, okay, a troll is frightening, it's scary, it's horrifying. But the thing I loved about Joe's writing is that Joe created a troll that was kind of stupid, dumb, almost like some of those Warner Brothers cartoon characters that I grew up loving.
It wasn't the most intelligent creature, was it? The troll was about 15 foot tall or something, and with a brain the size of a peanut.
We wanted to create a troll that would be comedic as well as frightening. So, if this troll killed you, it killed you because of its immensely dumb fury.
The original American edition, it had little illustrations in them, and the troll had spiky legs. I remember I kept on leaving it out because I couldn't make sense of it. And then Chris Columbus kept on insisting, can we have those spiky legs? So it was like, okay, so how do we make this practical? In the end, it was just imagine they were very long warts that were on his legs.
That troll was built. There was a full-grown troll lying on that bathroom floor for the kids to interact with.
Troll bogies.
Trolls then didn't appear until we were discussing on Half-Blood Prince. They were going to do a sequence where trolls ballet dance. And so we actually built 2 troll suits that were designed so that you could do ballet in them. When you look at the design of a troll, it's insane. You know, I mean, complete lummoxing things. It was completely hysterical. The whole department were just falling about. In the end, it didn't happen, because just any scene you put it in, it just destroyed the floor.
When the pixies move like this, they shoot across the room and then shoot somewhere else. So what I need you guys to do is be looking all around the room and freaking out.
I remember in the second film, there's a scene in Gilderoy Lockhart's classroom where there are these little pixies.
No harm can befall you whilst I am here. I must ask you not to scream. It might provoke them!
The pixies, for me, were a little homage to a film I wrote years ago called Gremlins. So the pixies were flying gremlins, but I wanted them to have a sense of humor like the Tasmanian Devil in the old Warner Brothers cartoons. So for me, the pixies were just the opportunity to recreate some of those characters that were part of my past.
I think the description in the book said they were blue, and I think it was just making them creaturey, as opposed to little people. Because it was a creatures class, you wanted to have these mischievous little blue creatures. I think it's probably like getting to meet a very small blue monkey.
Cornish pixies fleetingly appear in an explosion of havoc to sort of show up Lockhart's incompetence. I mean, no one in their right mind would even think about opening that cage door, because it's sort of worse than unleashing a hornet's nest. When you see them for the first time unveiled in this cage and you see all these guys with these big eyes and these cute little faces, you don't really expect them to do anything.
Cornish pixies?
The moment you open the cage, blah, everything explodes.
They've attached wire to bits of my hair, and I had to pretend they were like pulling my hair.
Lots of excitement and action.
Get off me!
Stop! Hold still!
I was like ducking and diving and like hitting them with books. I just remember having loads of fun with that scene.
Chris Columbus had several iconic images that he wanted to put in there. He wanted to see the pixies ripping up the books and bringing the skeleton of the dinosaur crashing to the ground. And I think it kind of represents all the dastardly things that children really want to do if they let loose. They kind of embody that repressed mischief that we all have as children.
Immobilized!
Grasp your mandrake firmly. You pull it sharply up out of the pot.
I know there are much bigger and grander and more magical things, but I love the mandrakes and how they scream. This mixture of plant and animal. It seems conceivable to me.
The mandrakes are completely mechanical. And those things, sometimes you can get away with complete puppets because of the texture of their skin. They look like a radish and a turnip, and they're covered with dirt. So in a situation like that, you don't have to resort to CGI because the mandrakes are completely believable.
The mandrakes, you know, are plants with personality, and it's a tricky thing. I remember talking to Stuart about it and saying they have to look sort of babyish. So there has to be a quality of nastiness in them. Because if you feel they're cute and then cut them up, it's kind of not very nice. So you look at it, you do not feel sympathetic to these things. They're just horrible.
Our mandrakes are still only seedlings. Their cries won't kill you yet, but they could knock you out for several hours, which is why I've given each of you a pair of earmuffs for auditory protection.
I remember they asked me to faint, and I've never ever seen anyone faint before, so I had no idea really. So I just copy what I've seen on TV, and you know, the really comedic like, oh dear me, that kind of faint. And I did it, and Chris Columbus seemed to quite like it, so we kept it with the eyes rolling back. But it was funny, and the mandrakes, they were amazing. The animatronics used in those were pretty special.
With the Grindelows, I had two stuntmen in blue suits on either side of me.
Grab him! Look up, Dan!
Each of them would grab one of my legs and just sort of pull me to and fro. So that was quite exciting.
They were described to us as the Cornish pixies of the underwater, so the sense of mischief and desire to sort of create havoc was central to their reason. They are half octopus, half human, very interesting little creatures. Because something that I think all of us are afraid of is putting our feet in the seaweed. Putting these creatures, Grindelows, in there is sort of playing off people's fears of the darkness under the water. Because, you know, you think, oh my God, what's in there?
The hippogriff is a kind of half horse, half eagle creature. Hagrid is obsessed with having pretty much lethal creatures as pets.
The creature, the hippogriff, exists in folklore and in mythology, so that's not my creation. But I really thought hard about this because it could have been an absurdity, and indeed it really could have been in the film as well.
The hippogriff scared me because I thought, how are you going to bring this to the screen? It's just an odd combination of animal elements. And Alfonso and I wanted any kind of scene to be character-defining in some way.
These different creatures, they are just extensions of the characters. The hippogriff, in a way, was one extension of Harry's coming of age, which he discovers his inner power and his freedom. What J.K. Rowling did so beautifully is that she just explored the archetypes of what it is to grow up. You go back, you stop, but it's the kind of stop that thing, you know, when it's like, I stop, any moment is coming, any moment is coming.
Keep still. You have to earn the right to fly on him. So it's all about teaching respect and learning respect for Harry.
It's that excitement of being able to slightly tame a wild creature that you wouldn't normally be able to even touch. That's like being out in Africa and the lion lies down and lets you pet it.
Like you ride him now. What? Come on.
Hey!
I always remember thinking, it's kind of like a parrot taking the guide wheels off the kid's bicycle for the first time. You say, you'll be fine, you won't fall off. You think, please God, don't let them fall over and break a limb.
The Fly with Buckbeak is about the empowerment of Harry. It's a 13-year-old kid who starts realizing that there's an inner power that he has to learn how to control. He needs to learn how to surrender in order to fly.
He's up in the air, and he just, sort of extends his arms, and he's no longer earthbound, and he's no longer burdened by all the problems that he has when he's on the ground. If he could only fly forever, he'd be all right.
He represents a certain wildness, and I had a real sense that he was real. The way he moved, everything about him I just loved.
We want to do an animal that is an animal. You know, it's nothing fancy. It happens to be very gracious when he's flying, very clumsy when he's walking, and sloppy. I remember one of our favorite designs, actually we discarded because it was too regal, it was too precious. Yeah, this is still a work in progress because that is too playful, too light.
Alfonso is very fluid in the way he works, which means it's very difficult to tie designs down. The detail, you know, which feathers were what colour, which feathers would be slightly longer, went on month after month after month, with me going, we have to build this. And I mean, I actually really enjoyed working with Alfonso, but it was a real battle because Alfonso never really wanted that design process to end. It was a really wonderful exercise to go through, but there were days when it was the closest I've ever come to thinking, you know, the reason this hippogriff isn't going to be ready is because I'm going to have inserted it into somebody. But I'm delighted with the result.
It could move, it just looked alive. You've just never seen anything like it.
There was a kid that actually visited the set one day, and the head suddenly went down like that. And the kid absolutely, I thought they were going to die with excitement.
It was pretty ambitious. We would build an animatronic Buckbeak, and not only build him, but we took him to Glencoe in Scotland, stuck him on a mountainside in blizzard conditions, and expected all the animatronics to work. It was a challenge, to say the very least. But even though he was a physical animatronic creature, he was enhanced and replaced with a digital creature.
With the half-bird, half-horse creature, we were looking at golden eagles, basically, and the way it moved, the physiology, capturing the way that the wings move and the chest moves. A very proud, majestic creature that had this sort of dangerous side to it.
We wanted to make something that would be realistic. I mean, it's so realistic that if people watch carefully, Buckbeak actually poos, you know, but it's not a big deal. It's just like, as a matter of fact, thing that Buckbeak does.
Fox is a very noble creature, and what we tried to achieve with him is really making a physical embodiment of that sort of Dumbledore noblesse. He's one of those creatures who is essentially wild, who has, out of respect for that particular human, deigned to be their familiar.
Fawkes is a sort of very inscrutable bird, and like Dumbledore, just full of surprise. It's like suddenly catches fire.
He does indeed burst into flames, and he ends up as a pile of ash on the tray beneath his perch. And then this tiny little creature is reborn out of the pile of ashes. And I think the wit and the charm of this creature actually is in the rebirth, is in this funny little chick that kind of pops his head up through the ashes.
Harry needed to experience these creatures as if he's seeing something unique and totally out of his world for the first time. When the reborn Fawkes comes out of the ashes, there's a wonderful expression on Dan's face when he's looking at this thing.
Oh, fascinating creatures, phoenixes.
And I really think Dan's performance captured that sense of wonder in seeing something that he's never seen before. There's this magical thing that happens with kids who are that young. They really were able to tap into that wonder.
Fawkes the Phoenix was a lovely thing to do because it was a complete creature. We had to build him on the stand, and he had to be able to move about and shuffle on the stand and all this and react to stuff. You couldn't get a matchstick inside because of all the electronics, but he could stretch open his wings and move his head, he could blink, his beak could move, sort of everything.
For Fawkes, it was finding a puppeteer who could actually convey the warmth and the movements of the bird, and then getting the CGI version of that bird to match that. I remember one of the funniest moments was working with Richard Harris, who was a little older in the second movie, and it was the first day of shooting in his office with Fawkes.
Richard Harris comes over to us and he says, "It's absolutely amazing how they train these things, isn't it?" Chris and I stood there for a minute and thought, I said, no, it's a puppet. And he went, "Bleep off."
He believed that Fawkes was real. And I thought, well, we've done a good job. If our actor who's standing 2 inches away from this thing believes that it's real.
Cut. And movie camera.
Pretty good, huh?
What is it? Thestrals are sort of inextricably linked with death, and so they're quite a morbid thing, but there's something rather beautiful about them as well.
You're not going mad. I can see them too. I always see Thestrals as sort of like the character of Edward Scissorhands, because they're really strange looking, they're really creepy, and you probably wouldn't go near them because they're so skeletal and black and just alarming. But when you're nice to them, they're really gentle, they're really loyal. And I think they're misunderstood, like a lot of creatures are.
There was something haunting and mysterious about them, something other. And at that point in the story, Harry had lost his parents, so they reflected an experience that was becoming a regular occurrence for him.
But why can't the others see them?
They can only be seen by people who've seen death.
Jo knows her mythology, and she twists it in her own brilliant way. The Thestrals were a brilliant personification of death. There's something strong and frightening, winged death flying, this sort of skeletal figure. And yet there's something kind of romantic, kind of fatalistic way, and I think it taps into something really deep and unconscious.
We spent a lot of time developing the character of the Thestrals themselves. We really had to get inside the head of these creatures. They do represent death, and we intended them to look quite almost grotesque in a way, but we didn't want to make them scary in a gratuitous way. They had to be regal as well. They had to be very serene and have a soul. I think that was important, that you had to feel these characters had a soul. Especially for David Yates, that the relationship that we were going to develop between Luna and Harry and the Thestrals was very important.
They're quite gentle, really, but people avoid them because they're a bit
different.
That relationship between Luna and Harry is really special. She's another outsider, but Luna's sort of made a friend of death, but she's accepted this as a fact of life.
J.K. Rowling, she said to me once, Luna's the most adjusted to death in the whole series. And I was saying even more than Dumbledore, and she said, yeah, definitely.
It was that juxtaposition of seeing Luna, this small, timid, defenseless little girl, with this great big beast to understand that these things are not dangerous and they're not frightening, but actually Luna shows that they are very, very beautiful creatures.
Luna's very wise because she's not afraid of death. She's able to stare it in the face and talk about it. That helps Harry a lot.
Jo is really interested in exploring the role of the outsider and giving them a place and giving them a voice. Ron, Harry, Hermione, in their own way, are outsiders, and creatures that she's created are part of this world. Some have been ostracized, some people respect them, and there's a big divide in the world between those that respect those creatures and those that don't.
Hello! I think Dobby the house elf will steal all the scenes he's in. Dobby!
I'll deal with you later.
If I'd realised he was going to be such an upstager, I might have gone a bit bigger.
Dobby, shush, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you or anything.
I saw Dobby as sort of combination between E.T. and Bugs Bunny a little bit. You know, someone who is endearing but also slightly mischievous and annoying.
With Dobby, it's this Dickensian kind of humility, depressed little figure. I mean, the big doe eyes and the big pixie ears, pointed ears.
In the second one, there was a devious element to him. He was protecting Harry, but he was sort of causing all these problems for Harry in an attempt to save his life.
Well, the first time I worked with Dobby, I said, so where's Dobby going to be in the room? Where should I look? And they went, well, wherever you look, that's where we'll put him.
Come, Dobby.
So we're up on a little platform for me to walk down, and I swung my leg viciously. As I got down the steps, I went, the cane like that. And so Chris goes, cut! Okay, great. You slip or something? And I went, no, I just kicked Dobby down the stairs. And he went, really? He said, what was the thing with the cane? I said, well, when he tried to get up, I bashed him on the head. He went, cool. But let's be honest, it's no fun sharing the screen with characters that are much loved. Particularly if we're trying to bully them.
Oh!
Our goal for Dobby was to create a character that the audience would fall in love with. I wanted the audience to actually feel real emotion for Dobby.
There's a vulnerability about the character and, if you like, a humility about the character that seems to complement the magical qualities of the character. So it's a magic that's sort of humble. And I think that endears the character in a way.
Our actor who came in and did the voice of Dobby, he just nailed it completely.
Of course, Dobby is still treated like vermin.
His performance was kind of heart-wrenching. So our animators worked on that, through that performance, and were able to create a Dobby that was very emotional.
He's like a child, so what we do then is find those little things, find very naturalistic movements that convey this idea of childhood through the little quivers of the lips and the way that, you know, he might get so caught up that he's almost oblivious to everything else. You know, that's how a child is. It's going to give you a sense of something real that the audience will respond to and end up loving this character.
Dobby, get back here.
When I got the part, I had no idea the fondness for all the characters, but Dobby in particular sort of elicits a sort of degree of loyalty from fans that I'm now very aware of. And so I feel very honoured to play a part in realising Dobby.
You shall not harm Harry Potter.
It's odd when kids come to the set. Dobby's one of the first people they want to meet. And you don't want to pull the curtain back in Oz too much. So sometimes I say he's in his trailer.
All I ever wanted to do to Dobby when I read the book was kick him. I'm sorry, I must have been in Slytherin, but I like Creature. Creature's a bastard, and that's fine.
Nasty brat standing there as bold as brass.
Creature and Dobby are both elves, but you've got a good version of it and a bad version of it. They've obviously gone to different schools, followed different paths, and ended up in different places, you know.
Rob listed some lovely stuff, and he did a little head, you know, it was just a little, quick little head, but he captured it, you know, it was like, ah, yes, yeah, bastard.
He's not as wide-eyed and youthful as Dobby. He doesn't have that sort of inspiration. Creature, really, he doesn't care about anything, and it shows through his body, his face, his wrinkled into this scowl that is fixed on his face. His body is crooked, and I feel like he's in a lot of pain. And that's what gives him his bad nature. But perhaps, you know, that's not who he always was. He's had a history that has made him into this very twisted, gnarly character.
Harry Potter, the boy who stopped the Dark Lord, friend of mudbloods and blood traitors alike.
I think Creature's bitter about his lot in life. But also, I think that he's a nice person waiting to happen.
Creature lives to serve the noble house of Black.
In our version of a centaur, we wanted to incorporate more of a mysterious sort of magical horse-like quality in their features. We were actually able to create a much more malevolent, much more frightening, much more powerful centaur by giving the centaur these horse-like features and finding a voice that was extremely powerful for that centaur.
You're safe now. Good luck.
The centaurs seem to portray the best and worst aspects of human nature. They sort of show our basic instincts and how they can serve us well, and how those same instincts can go against you. Pride, being protected, being territorial. The centaurs are not free to roam, and they're aggressively protecting what territory they have left.
I warn you, under the law, as creatures of near human intelligence... How dare you!
And I think what's special about what JK's done is she sort of said, well, you know, it's our nature that has damaged our relationship with these creatures, and we're the poorer for it.
Filthy half-breed! Incautious!
To be called a filthy half-breed negates your heritage and your history. So there's that idea of wounding from the past.
The centaurs in the books are imbued with such wisdom. I don't think I've seen that before. But we kind of struggled with the representations of them on the screen.
They are impossible creatures. They have 6 limbs, which makes them impossible to render in our terms, because you step over into this area of non-credible, non-real. But nonetheless, we made a considerable effort to make them seem real.
I'm sorry, Professor. I must not tell lies.
Hagrid, what exactly are these things?
They're goblins, Harry. Clever as they come, goblins, but not the most friendly of beasts.
The goblin world doesn't like to really associate with the wizarding world particularly. You know, goblins will take whichever side feels best. They're happy to kind of hold the wizard's money, but I don't think they want to get involved. The goblins have elements of greed. They are fairly vicious at times, sort of menacing kind of quality. Somebody you wouldn't trust.
When we did the goblins for the first time, David Heyman from the very beginning, said to me, this is not a fantasy film. These goblins have got to feel totally real. They've got to feel like real people in their own environment. They're very stylized, but they do fit the flavor of the first movie.
We had to find little people and apply prosthetics onto them. And that was a very difficult kind of situation, because when we got to the location where we're shooting Gringotts, some of the actors weren't really happy about this really kind of extensive makeup that they had to go through in the morning. Some of them 2.5 hours, 3 hours. So by the time the day was wearing on, some of our goblins were getting a little grumpy. And I remember one guy, I was trying to get a performance out of him, and I said, you need to convey that you hate Harry, that you hate him. And he nodded, and I said, you know what that means. And he goes, yeah, I hate you. And I said, excuse me? He goes, I hate you. And I was at a loss for words.
When we came back to it on the last movies, we sat back and thought, okay, it's been nearly 10 years. They've got to be so much better. There are 60 goblins, and I wanted every single one to be different. So 60 were sculpted.
It's a team effort. It's the person who originally drew the concept art. It's the person who then took that and sculpted the clay and created the shape. It's the person that then paints that makeup.
Creator.
And then applies it to the face.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of people involved.
Characters are multi-layered things, so you need to sort of put that in, even if it's completely artificial. Say, this is the grumpy one, you know, I think this one doesn't like that one. This one can't sit down easily. Let's give him a bit of an Elvis, or, you know, let's have a bit of a comb over. There's no logic to it, but that can drive a sculpt. I don't think anyone's ever done anything like this in Britain before, on this scale. Yeah. It's just insane.
I think it's a lovely fact.
Peter Pettigrew is a man who's been a rat for the last 13 years. And so he has to behave still like a rat.
He had 12 years as a rat. You know, it's going to rub off, isn't it? In your habit, it wouldn't make you very clean in your habits, would it?
Haven't I been a good friend, a good pet? You won't let them give me to the Dementors, will you? I was your rat.
Tim went for it. Let's do the ears a little pointier, and let's have hair in the ears, and let's have a lot of hair coming out of your nose, and let's add like 2 big teeth in the front.
He's always got his hands sort of out like that, and there is a sort of a thing that happens to him. You know, it's like a cringing sort of, and you know, so it's a rat in human form.
Wow, I think of him, and he's creepy.
Flesh, servant, willingly sacrificed.
Kind of quite protective of Wormtail, although he's a dastardly beast. A malevolent, craven, two-faced swine. I've got an affection for him. Yes, it can't help it. It's got to survive. There's not a career scheme down in the sewer. You can't retrain and become a guinea pig or a fluffy rabbit. And Pettigrew is the ultimate survivor. He'd probably survive a nuclear explosion.
I think Lupin is perhaps Joe's greatest creation in some ways as a character. I think he's so heartbreaking in many ways.
Your mother was there for me at a time when no one else was. She had a way of seeing the beauty in others, even and perhaps most especially when that person could not see it in themselves.
When you think about the werewolf that is Professor Lupin, it's nothing but that dark side that is behind this very sweet character. We always used to say that is your favorite uncle that has like a dark secret. You know, you don't know if he has skeletons in the closet or some weird secret that the family tends to just keep quiet.
He's a werewolf! That's why he's been missing classes.
It was a way of showing that grown-ups too are flawed, because Lupin is flawed. He's not completely honest about what he is. He's vulnerable, he's afflicted by his past, he's very vulnerable to public opinion, and he tries to compensate for that.
You know the man you truly are, Remus. This flesh is only flesh. This heart is where you truly live.
There's no real point in playing Lupin overtly as a werewolf that there will be anything that his character that shows. I mean, physically he's scratched, and of course then there's the transformation, which there's a lot to think about then.
Having all this reference of great werewolves in many films, we wanted to challenge the concept.
We had an American guy called Wayne Barlow came on. Wayne did a drawing that was of a werewolf that was looking a bit more pathetic and a bit more kind of sad and a bit kind of messed up and hairless as well. And that kind of had a spirit that Alfonso liked.
We did build a werewolf suit. That was, I think, the worst nightmare I've ever had. The design was very, very skeletal. And I kept saying, well, yeah, but to put somebody in it, you know, we can't cut bits off actors. They don't like that. So, you know, we're going to have to make some concession.
At one point I was going to hang from chains, and these animatronic legs they built were going to stretch and come out of my knees, so I had to be hung from chains. And that turned out not to be practical, much to my relief, because it looked really very uncomfortable to do that.
We had a kickboxer and a dancer, and they were both very, very slim. So we made some lovely stilts, and the guys could actually run about on these stilts. But when we put them in the real suit, it was so tight that it actually did restrict their movement slightly. And when you're balancing 3 feet off the ground, gives you that sort of thing.
And house.
The restrictions of the costume meant he couldn't be quite as athletic. Alfonso wanted something athletic. He wanted this thing coming in fast and, you know, pouncing and fighting with the dog especially. And eventually we just found it through this process of back and forth and working with Alfonso. When I think werewolf, I think American Werewolf in London, which is one of my favourite films. But this was scarier because it looks human gone wrong. And that's, I think, always more frightening than a monster. It's got that creepy, spindly, slightly naked look, but it's a beast and it's dangerous.
I think the fundamental differences between Lupin and Greyback is that Lupin doesn't want to be a werewolf, and Greyback's just can't wait for the next full moon so he can bite some faces off. But also Greyback is stuck between being a werewolf and a human.
I started off looking as a man when I was first infected, but I've changed so many times, and every time I change, I retain a little bit of wolf in me, and so I'm becoming more and more of a wolf.
If you saw this guy at a distance, you'd just think, it's a big guy and he looks rather threatening.
You know, the minute you come here, he's like the lamb and you're the wolf.
And I'm just looking for an opportunity to get
Yeah, and it's only when you get really close to him that you would make a connection as to what's happening here. He's taken on wolf-like characteristics. The character of Greyback, when you read the book, he's a child killer. He's a very, very nasty predator.
I think he's probably the most evil man because he is a man and he doesn't necessarily have to be as horrible as he is. But what I found in him was there's a sense of isolation, that if the world treated him like he was one of them, he might accept that because he's an outcast, then he feels rejected and he's going to make everyone pay.
I think that the dark creatures are the fear. They do represent our darkest fears. She's maybe latched onto creatures that are naturally scary, such as werewolves and giant spiders and things. But I think the most interesting creatures are the ones that she's completely created herself, such as dementors.
The Dementors are these creatures which drain every person in their vicinity of every joyous feeling and leaves them with nothing.
I had a nightmare when I was in my teens in which I saw hooded gliding figures, and that image haunted me. And the Dementors for me were about depression. And I joined the two. When I was looking for something, I thought that's what they would be like. And then I had to decide what was under the hood. What is the final consequence of very, very severe depression, where you exist without hope? I had to make that visual, so I described the eyeless face, you know, with just the gaping, sucking mouth.
For me, it was more a process of understanding what these creatures are. This is not a monster that's going to come and attack you and rip you into pieces. It's something way more abstract.
I remember one point, I think, with Alfonso, when he was going on about loads of eyes, there was something, he had this big thing about the Dementors and lots of eyes.
Remember, there was the storyboards of Dementors approaching the train. A week later, I just started hearing rumors that everybody was so proud to be working with a genius. And they would say, wow, your surreal imagery is amazing. Until I see the storyboards, and there's water. And the water transforms into ice. I didn't know how to tell them that I meant ice like frozen water. Because I was already a genius.
It was a difficult one because essentially it was a big load of cloth. It was like I personally couldn't find a way of drawing that.
We used as reference people who had been embalmed and the cloth was wrapped around them coming away.
We even bring this puppeteer from San Francisco, and we did tests like for 10 days of puppeteering underwater that then we would shoot backwards to create like the whole eerie effect.
The first time you see one, the third film, and you see the cloth hand come around in the train, is very effective.
You were scared for everybody sitting on the train. Alfonso was quite keen that they were spectral and almost at a distance all the time, so they didn't have to touch you. They would hover close to you and the world around you would freeze, but they'd actually be able to just do all of their necessary damage and just purely through the soul suck.
Alfonso wanted to scare kids. He wanted those Dementors to be terrifying. Because it's not a happy world all the time. Harry Potter is a dangerous world.
You're dying. Both of you.
We want to tap into that darkness, and Alfonso did that.
The Dementors scene was the moment where I first sort of went, this film is going to be really, really scary. When David talked me through the ideas for the scene, I thought, wow, this is really, really brilliant.
In the book, it's in an alley, and it was David Yates' idea to set it in this underpass. So that was brilliant, this confined, scary, and yet very real place.
An underpass is kind of cold and creepy. This is where bad things happen. It felt like a natural fit to introduce the Dementors into that arena.
To juxtapose that with these terrifying creatures made them all the more frightening somehow.
Rather than just making it about a soul suck, we wanted to give them more physicality. So there's a moment where they pick him up and slam him against the wall.
There's always something sensorial about that and about the dampness of them and the way a bony finger can press against Harry's neck and the marks that it can leave and the smell that they have when they get particularly close. When talking to Dan about those things, what does it feel like when that breath starts to brush against your nostril just before they start to try and suck out your soul?
There's a moment when the scene sort of holds and both of them are trapped. Dudley's lying down and Harry's up against the wall and you think it's over and David just sort of lingers on that horrific moment, letting you savor it.
Expecto Patronum!
Lumos.
The Inferi are the living dead. We didn't want them to be your classic zombie, but we imbued them with a melancholy, a sadness, and a humanity, or humanity that's been taken away.
I saw some of the early concept drawings in Creature Effects. They're nasty, they're horrible, like, rotting corpses.
They push very hard for them to be scary. Beyond that, I did just think if I had been kept underwater for 20 years, I'd come up looking white and skinny.
It was really important that you almost felt sorry for these people because they're ultimately the victims of Voldemort. They're not there out of choice. So we wanted to try and tap into a human-looking skeletal form, but that was more dead-looking, if you like.
My chief sculptor, Julian Murray, spent months sculpting Inferi. It's really tricky. You read it and they're all horrible and skeletal, ghastly things. It was, yes, they're creeping me out, but are they creeping me out for the right reason? We're making a kids' movie here. We're not making an indictment of human cruelty.
the same time it was important. We created a pretty scary sequence. When Harry falls under the water, we really wanted to develop the whole extent of how vast this world of Inferi were.
We did movement tests with people. They were a combination, I think, of dancers and movement artists that we literally said, okay, move in an interesting way. They're dead souls. But we wanted something off and weird about them.
At one time we had these conjoined Inferi, the idea that these bodies had been under the water for so long that they actually had fused together and become like coral. Just the idea that these creatures could become multi-limbed, multi-headed bodies. It was an interesting stage to go through to really try and develop these things. But we ended up with something that was more realistic looking. I think that's probably the most scary thing in a way.
There's a line in a poem somewhere. It's about the First World War. It's Wilfred Owen, I think, where he talks about a person who has breathed in some horrible poison gas, and it says that he had the face of a devil sick with sin. And I always thought that Voldemort ought to look like a devil sick with sin, that what he's given himself over to world domination, and he was prepared simply to sacrifice any humanity in himself. He had to have been human, but now have regularly pushed aside his humanity.
Voldemort was a combination of baby and somebody who's so critically disabled, lost all its power, all its strength, all its vitality. I think the attitude of the feet and the toes and of the hands are absolutely inspired, you know. It's that thing that the best artists have that immediately hits a chord, and I think those shriveled, curled feet do exactly that.
When we first sort of get introduced to Voldemort in the fourth film, when he's coming back, when he's being reborn, he's very much a creature, you know, he's not whole human. And we see the birth of him.
He's not human anymore because he's split his soul so many times. He's become this sort of aberration of humanity.
He is, you know, a complete, unreserved animal side of human nature. And when he's reborn, he really is this sort of out-of-control force of nature.
I think Voldemort becomes more of a creature and less human as the story goes on. In Order of the Phoenix, I always thought of him as a person. I always wanted to imagine, as unpleasant as it was, what the world looked like through those eyes. Somebody who genuinely believes that love is a joke, that anybody who trusts anybody else is a fool. I think it makes it harder to dismiss him, because I think there's a little tiny bit of Voldemort in all of this.
Do it!
So weak. I wanted Harry to have that moment of pity. If not compassion, pity.
You'll never know love or friendship. And I feel sorry for you.
To me, there's something tragic about him. At some point, he was just a little kid who got abandoned on a doorstep.
I
can make bad things happen to people who are mean to me. I can make them hurt. If I want.
When I saw my nephew, Hero, who played the young Tom Riddle, Voldemort, he has such a wonderful quality of a boy's loneliness because the world has rejected him, which is the beginning of a sort of rage against the world.
Well, I'm like you, Tom. I'm different.
Prove it.
He's a lost soul. He's mad. He's lost. He's totally screwed up. And the only thing that fires him is more power, more ability to destroy people.
You're a fool, Harry Potter. And you will lose everything.
The creatures in Harry's world all present challenges. They're nearly always something that's there to be overcome. They're way stations in Harry's journey.
I think the creatures are about that myth of slaying the dragon. It is controlling the uncontrollable or destroying the undestroyable. So the creatures are obstacles that Harry needs to overcome to prove himself.
I think he's learning throughout all of the stories that we're defined by actions, not what we say, but what we do.
Dobby is free.
Harry is the sort of character that learns from all of the creatures. Harry learns respect and grace under pressure.
Don't you turn your back on me!
And the nature of true courage.
You'll be okay, Harry. You're a great wizard. You really are.
Expecto Patronum!